So shape modes create an interaction between two or more objects, and I would argue that it's probably best to only use two objects. You can use more, but sometimes the results can be different, at least in the shape modes. So I'm going to drag, notice I'm on the black arrow, I'm going to drag a selection rectangle over top of this to select them both. You could just click on one, hold down the shift key, and click on the other, and then you could end up with a double selection, but this works as well. So got a selection. If I click on the Unite option, it becomes one color. Notice that the top color, see the blues on top of the red, becomes the dominant tone. This is now one shape. So if you went and clicked on one of these objects, it wouldn't be two objects that are just blue. It's actually one object now because they've been combined. So moving on to the next one. This is minus front, so we got to take off the topmost object and cut it through the bottom one, kind of like you have a cookie cutter and you cut into another cookie and drag away the dough. So here you've got the remainder. There you are. You'll see these blue outlines in the back. That's part of my template, so you can see what happened. Third one is an intersection. So where two objects overlap, you can create a remainder object. In this case, you see a square, and you're like, why would I do that? Let's say, for example, off on this, actually down here, I'll make two different circles. Make one of them a different color so that you can see the difference here. So if you combine them too, you can actually end up with a really decent eyeball shape. Whereas in hand drawing, that might be complicated. And the final one, this is an exclusion event. So the overlap is excluded. And that becomes a transparent environment, which I put over here. And remember your arrange options. We'll bring that to the front. You can see through. It says a transparent edge. So these are the primary shape modes used all the time. So this allows you to combine multiple objects, cut one through, take the intersection, or take the remainder. The following Pathfinders, these are kind of the extras, other things that you can do. And I'm going to add a stroke to all of these so that you can see what happens to that stroke, because it's one thing up here, you're not seeing what happens to the stroke, but it can really affect the outcome. Let's see, we'll make that stroke big enough that you can see it. Alright, so the first shape mode, this I use a lot, it's divide. Basically it does what all of the ones at the top did in one time. You can't quite tell because they move together, they're still grouped. But if you go to our object to ungroup, notice that Command Shift G is ungroup and deselect. Now I can pull the parts out of it. And so sometimes you might want all of those pieces. And that's a really good tool to use for that. So you can just chop it up, that's divide. Next one over here is trim. This has to do with making sure that where two objects meet, they meet exactly. So now if I go down here and I ungroup this one, you'll see that it met right up with that point. And sometimes, and you'll see this in some of my icon examples, that they have a little offset gap that they put in there just for creative influence. And this would be based on old print methods where the alignment wasn't just so between the plates, and sometimes you'd have these white gaps in between those. So that can be kind of fun to use as a kind of a space between colors. If you had multiple objects involved, so you have two colors that are the same and one that's not. There we go. In the case of merge, if you have two like objects, they're merged into one object, and then this is a different color and it says a different object. And so if I ungroup, that's the difference between this one and this one. And then the bottom ones. And if you see when I go over top of these, the outcome is explained. And we'll show what happens. This could be almost experimental, but you can see what happens. So in this case, it trimmed it. Same as this, but a little bit different because that edge is still there. So you can still move it around if you needed to. This creates an outline. You can't see it because it's a hairline right now. Let me increase that percentage. There you go. So it takes the fill color and makes them into outlines. Then you have the final one, minus back. It's because it's missing from up here. Traditionally it was there, but it used to be minus front or minus back, but basically whatever object's in the back cuts through the one in the front. So with a range, you can basically do the same things. So these options for shape modes, strongest, and then down here are some variables that you may find yourself needing at other times, in particular the top three.